I think it is, in part. But that's not the primary thing that God is saying here. It is pollution of the hearts of mankind. God gave each human being a conscience. And you ought to consider a conscience to be something like a set of moral nerves. But can you cauterize a nerve such that it's not going to feel anymore? You can do that. In the same way, what is happening here, these people are becoming so calloused to sin and what is going on, it doesn't bother them anymore. And this is growing in this time. Now, that's not a process that can happen immediately. It takes time. And that's why we're seeing it before this time comes. We're seeing it here in our life and in our culture as this callousing effect to sin grows. Now, as a result of three things, disobeying the natural laws, disobeying God's statutes, and violating His covenant, there is a curse upon the earth. And why would God speak of a curse or level a curse against the earth? Well, had He ever done that before? In Genesis chapter 3, when man first sinned, He said, because of that, the earth is cursed. Now, has that curse ever been lifted? No, and in fact, what we haven't come to grips with yet is that curse is growing. And it's becoming stronger and stronger as sins pile up. I mean, think of the amount of sin in the world when Adam said, okay, I'll eat it, compared to the amount of sin in the world now. It's extraordinarily different, and that curse is growing. Now, it could be that the covenant it's speaking about is the Abrahamic covenant. Now, at first, people would want to say, no, it can't be the Abrahamic covenant because people don't violate that. That's not a covenant made to the world. You know, you'd look at the Noahic covenant at the flood. That was made to everyone, all human beings. This is made, the Abrahamic covenant was given to the Jews. Oh, yes. But there were provisions in there about non-Jews. And what was it? If you bless my people, I will bless you. But if you curse my people, I will curse you. Now, at this time in this tribulation period, how is the world going to be treating the Jewish people? Basically killing them. It's going to be the same as with Hitler, only they will have a much better means of doing it. And they'll have access to the whole world to exterminate as many Jews as you can. 2/3 of the Jewish population during that 7-year period will die. Do you think that God won't curse anybody as a result of that? Of course He will.
What about us? Are we included in that?
No, because we won't be here during that time period. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, could this violation of the covenant also be a violation of the Noahic covenant? Well, we're going to have to wait and look at a few things about that in just a minute. But verse 7 here, as we're looking at this, it gives us a powerful picture of what life will be like during the tribulation period. Yes, we've heard about all these kinds of things, like in Revelation, all these judgments that are going to befall. You got seal judgments, you got trumpet judgment, you got bowl judgments, and things that God are doing. But what is life like on the earth? And the answer is horrible. Well, why do you say horrible? Can you imagine life with no fun, no mirth, no frivolity, no good times? That's what it's going to be like without any of those things. Even if you say, well, you know, I can't be happy in this situation because of all this, I'll drink myself happy. Nope, not going to work. It may have worked other times, but it's not going to work in this time. I want you to see that as we go on here. Look at this passage again. The earth is also polluted by its inhabitants, for they transgress laws, violate statutes, and break the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse devours the earth, and those who live in it are going to be held guilty. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men will live. Now, go on to verse 7. The new wine mourns. Now, what is new wine? New wine is wine that hasn't fermented fully, and so its content of sugar is much higher than in fully developed wine or fully fermented wine. You know, the sugar is what turns to alcohol. And so it's a much more pleasant drink to drink, new wine. So a sweeter wine mourns. Why? Because of the horror that it's facing. The vine decays, all the merry-hearted sigh. The gaiety of tambourine ceases, the noise of revelers stops, the gaiety of the harp ceases. They do not drink wine with song. Strong drink is bitter, and to those who drink it. It appears that one of the effects of the retribution of the Lord God is the loss of happiness, revelry, and fun on the earth. It's not going to be there. The world's mirth and revelry by means of escapist actions such as alcohol or drugs fall silent and can't be revived. Then it uses this word that was translated in the New American Standard as gaiety. This is not talking about a sexual perversion. This is talking about exaltation, rejoicing. You could even use it to describe joy at such times. I'm going to make a distinction about that in just a minute. And instead of gaiety, what does it become? Gloom. What is gloom? It's bad. It's a darkness. It's a depression and discouragement. All these things of emotional trauma, that's all involved in gloom. And that's what it's going to be like. Who would ever want to live during this period of time? Now, understand that people are going to try to use inebriation to escape. But it's not going to work anymore. What does it say? Inebriation no longer works as it had before, and drinks become bitter, and there's no merriment. How sad this is, describing this period of time. Now, the next thing it says, is starting in verse 10, the city of chaos is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none may enter. There's an outcry in the streets concerning the wine. All joy turns to gloom. The gaiety of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city, and the gate is battered. Now, let's start with this phrase, the city of chaos. That's how it's in the New American Standard. In the King James, it's the city of confusion. In the ESV, it's the city broken down. This word chaos is one that Paul uses a great deal. Isaiah uses a great deal in his prophecy. It's a small little word, Hebrew word, tohu. Tohu. Tohu means formlessness, confusion, unreality, or emptiness. Now, when you talk about a city, do you have formlessness, confusion, or emptiness? No, that's not what a city is. A city is full of people. A city has all kinds of things built up. But that is what's coming. Now, it's interesting. Where was the first place this word was ever used in the Bible? Genesis chapter 2. Pardon me, chapter 1, verse 2. 1, 2. Very good. And it says, and the earth was, and in most Bibles translate formless. I think empty is also a way of understanding the meaning of that word. You combine those two, formless and empty. You can see it right there. And the earth was formless and void. Now, void is the word vohu. But formless is tohu. And that's important for us to understand. It's going to become more and more important as we go along in this book. Now it said the city is broken down. What that means is it's broken into pieces. In my house, every once in a while, something falls and breaks. And I immediately look at that. Well, can I take that and glue it back together? And many times I can. But sometimes when it falls, it breaks into so many pieces, that's it. Might as well just throw it away. Get it out so nobody cries anymore. And that's what this word is about, broken into pieces so that it's irreparable. Now, the question then becomes, what city is Isaiah talking about? Well, some people think that it's Jerusalem that it's referring to. Others want to say that it's Babylon, which we've talked about before, because it's going to be a physical place during the tribulation, Babylon is. Still others say, no, it's generalized, and it means the cities of the world. I tend to lean towards Babylon, since the context of this passage is dealing with the world system that will be involved at that time. Babylon, both as a physical place, as an economic system, and as a religious structure. All of those three things will be involved in Babylon in this revelation time of happening. But then it goes on to talk about, again, the loss of all happiness. All happiness. Now, some people really don't understand about happiness. And we need to come to grips with this, because this is very, very important. I remember a long time ago when the Lord taught me this concept. It wasn't really very fun when He did, but He did anyway. And that fun isn't necessarily part of His teaching. But happiness depends on happenings. If the happenings are good, what are you? Happy. If the happenings are bad, what are you? Sad. Unhappy. In other words, happiness is controlled by circumstances, right? Does God ever want us to be controlled by circumstances? Well, what is it that God gives us as opposed to happiness? Joy. Exactly right. Joy is something that does not depend on the circumstances. I can remember as a sophomore in college, being up here on it was either an OU weekend or a Thanksgiving holiday, one or the other, but my dad told me, your mom's upstairs dying. And in fact, it infuriated me, because I said, well, how can you do this to me, God? And I said, Dad, I've never seen my dad before not know what to do. Certainly having to learn from me what to do. And I said, well, you need to go call her doctor or cardiologist, and you need to call an ambulance right now. All right, I'll go do that. And I went out the front door. I said, I'll wait out there until they come to make sure they're coming to the right house. I went out there and yelled at God. How can you do this to me? I need her. I can't lose her. How would you? And all of a sudden, joy started filling up in my soul and overflowing out. And I'm mad because He's doing this to me, because I wanted to be mad at Him, not joyful. And finally, I got the point. Now, my mother made it through that, and I had her for a number of years since then. But He used that event to teach me joy is something that God plants in our hearts. Now, very few people during this time can have joy. Why? Because there's very few believers. And in fact, if you agreed to invite Christ into your life during this 7-year time, What's going to happen to you? You're going to die. And what kind of method are they going to use to kill you? Beheading. Beheading. You know, I don't know why it would be beheading. Nobody does that anymore, do they? But the fact is that that's exactly what has happened, and we need to understand that. And we need to understand that difference. So, the world does not have the Spirit resident within them, and so they really have no godly joy. And Isaiah is telling us that the happenings during this period of time are all bad. Hence, unhappiness is pervasive. It's like, and even an intoxicant like wine or strong drink is unable to provide any kind of relief. All joy turns to gloom. And we need to see that. And then it says desolation has overtaken the city, and anyone can come in through the gate. Desolation seems to mean to be a word that we don't really attach the meaning to. Because desolation can mean waste. Desolation can also mean horror or appallment. Now, appallment you won't find in most of your spell checks, and you got to add it to your library. But horror and appallment are what it's talking about here. I mean, think about this. You wake up in the morning and you're living in horror. All through the day, it's horror and it's appalling. And you go to bed the same way. This is the way life is going to be during this terrible period of time. Now, Isaiah is going to now use a figure of speech. And in verse 13, he's going to give us some examples of what's going on here. In verse 13 of chapter 24 says this, "For thus it will be in the midst of the earth among the peoples as the shaking of an olive tree and the gleanings of the grape harvest is over." Now, there's some people who want to say, well, this is talking about Israel here because it says the olive tree and the grapevine. No, it's not talking about Israel. Who's it talking about? What does the verse say? Peoples. The peoples, that's the earth. That's the inhabitants of the earth. It's not just Jewish people. It's not just believers. It's everyone. What is going to happen? He is going to take the earth and he is going to shake it violently. And it says it's like shaking violently an olive tree at the harvest time. All the olives basically fall off except just a few. And in effect, he's saying, that's how many people will be left when I get through shaking the earth. Then he's going to say with the grapevine, once the grapes are harvested, there's very little left for the gleaners usually. Israel wasn't known for leaving a lot of grapes on the vine for gleaners. And so that's how many people are going to be left. Not very many. People will be dying right and left. You think about it. Imagine just a second, 1 out of every 2 people you know will die during the 7-year period. 1 out of every 2 you know. That's pretty serious. If you know 4, 2 are going to die. If you know 10, 5 are going to die. Yes, ma'am.
Are people going to know that they are in the tribulation, or is there another explanation?
Yes, they will. And here's how I know that. The question was, are people going to know they're in the middle of this horrible period of time? And I'm saying, yes, they will. And how can you know that? Well, I can know that because in Revelation chapter 6, at the end of the chapter, all these terrible things are starting to happen. And what does it say about these people? And the kings of, I'm reading in verse 15, and the kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and the strong and every slave and free man hid themselves in caves in the rocks. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come. They know who's doing it, But how are they responding? Are they saying, God, we made a mistake. We want to repent. What do I do to be saved? No. They say, just kill us. End this. That's what they're doing. Excellent question, Candace. Now, we see this picture of the olive tree and the grapevine, and now something happens. And I want you to look at the change here in verse 14. They raise their voices, they shout for joy. Now wait a second. No one can have joy without God. What is this talking about? They cry out from the west concerning the majesty of Yahweh. Therefore glorify Yahweh in the east. The name of Yahweh, the God of Israel, in the coastlands of the sea and from the ends of the earth we hear songs, glory to the righteous one. All of a sudden, in the midst of this prophecy of horrible times, a beam of light shines out. And all of a sudden there rises the voices of those praising the Lord and extolling His majesty and His righteousness. Isaiah's prophecy of doom and gloom is interrupted by the sound of a distant song, a sound of praise. A song sung by a redeemed remnant. Now notice in this verse, it doesn't say, or you can't really identify except by the actions, the antecedent, that pronoun they. Who is this they? Well, the they is the believers who are still alive, who have received or believed in the only begotten Son of God. Now I want you to see this because there's an interesting corollary. Isaiah is talking about the tribulation. What's the other book in the Bible that has extensive time on the tribulation? Revelation. Revelation chapter 6 through chapter 19 is talking about the tribulation period. And you overlay it to Isaiah and you can really understand what is going on. Each one gives a little something different added to it. It's not that it contradicts or is different in that respect, but it gives you facts that you didn't know from the other. But both of them are like this. You remember in chapter 6, which we just looked at of Revelation, there are 6 seal judgments. During the midst of that, there's going to be world war, it says. There's going to be tremendous famine. 1/4 of the people on the earth are going to die. That's chapter 6. Now you skip a chapter and you come over here to chapters 8 and 9. There's the final seal judgment being opened, and then there's going to be 7 trumpet judgments. And each judgment from the seals, each one gets worse. After one of these judgments, you think, how could it get any worse? And yet it does get worse. And worse, just like it is here. But chapter 7 in the book of the Revelation speaks of the appointing and anointing of the 144,000 Jewish witnesses and the people who come to know the Lord and then are going to be martyred. So there's this ray of hope in the middle of all this judgment in the book of Revelation. Here in Isaiah 1 through 13 is talking about this devastation to the earth. And then 16b to the end of the chapter, verse 23, talking about devastation and the horror of the tribulation period. But right in the middle, the ray of hope, the song of praise. Do you see that? How that works? And how awesome that is to see and understand. God's always wants to provide us with a ray of hope. That's just what He wants. And nestled in between these two passages, one finds the praise, thanksgiving, and glorifying by God of those who love Him. Now, we move on. And this is a difficult passage right now to understand how this first part works in verse 16b. But I say, now, starting out, but I say, who is that? I believe it's Isaiah. he's saying, he's telling us, but I say, woe to me. It wouldn't be God, because God wouldn't be saying, woe to me. Woe to me, alas for me. Basically, 3 times he's saying it. And so that's a strong, the treacherous deal treacherously, and the treacherous deal very treacherously. Terror and pit and snare confront you, O inhabitants of the earth. Then it will be that he who flees the report of disaster will fall into the pit. He who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare. For the windows above are open, and the foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken asunder. The earth is split through, and the earth is shaken completely or violently. The earth reels to and fro like a drunkard, and it totters like a shack. For its transgression is heavy upon it, and it will fall never to rise again. So this passage now returns us to judgment. And what is happening here, it's almost like Isaiah is including himself in this. Why is he doing that? Because he sees what is going to happen to his people. And he sees the horror that his people are going to have to face. And he sees that it is terrible. And he identifies himself with the people of that future time that he has prophesied about earlier in this chapter. And he speaks of people wasting away. And one of the reasons for that feeling is treachery and betrayal. You know, if you were to go and see the people in North Korea right now, they're wasting away. They are dying of malnutrition and starvation. They are completely emaciated and emotionally hamstrung. And it's horrible what is being done to those people in that country. And now, sometimes I don't like to do this because some people don't like it. But the Hebrew linguistics in this passage right here, if you were very conversant in Hebrew, it is amazing. And it's one of the tip of the tops. And the linguistics employed by Isaiah here display an amazing, or give us an amazing display of paranomasia. Now that's a Hebrew figure of speech. I have a footnote there if you want to know what paranomasia means. It's there, but it is an example of Isaiah's tremendous skill in the language arts of Hebrew. And so he stresses the inescapability of this judgment. You can't escape it. 3 elements of which are the overwhelming fear, the inescapability of the pit, and the cunning ambush of the snare. Now, how many of you ever watch horror movies? Anybody? I don't like horror movies myself, but every once in a while I'm there, and I guess one of the reasons I got where I didn't like them because when I saw one in a movie theater, people would ruin it. But you would see this, and it seems like it happens more to women than to men, but they're horribly afraid, and they're running that way, but they're looking this way to see if something's chasing them. And you know, you want to yell, "Look in front of you!" You know, and then they fall into this pit, or the monster gets them, or they run into the chainsaw guy, and you know, and it's, why were you so stupid that you would do that? And then the reason is, of course, fear has overtaken them. They are panicked. And that's what this is saying here. It starts out with this overwhelming fear of panic, and they don't know what to do. And they try to run, and they can't get away. And they fall into the pit. And if they're able to climb out of the pit, then there's going to be a snare that traps them. And then Isaiah weaves 2 allusions into this passage that I want you to see. Can we show them this? For the windows above are opened, and the foundations of the earth shake. Now, Dawn, what does that cause you to think of? Noah's flood. The windows of the heavens were opened and the rain came down, but it didn't just come from above. It came from below too as the foundations of the earth were shaken. Now, why would he say that? It may be, and I tend to lean this way in my thinking, that the covenant, the everlasting covenant is being broken, is the Noahic covenant. In what caused it? What were the two things that went on before the flood that God said, I've got to intervene and stop this? What were the two things? Can anybody tell me? Violence and angelic infiltration of the human race. Those two things. Now let's talk about this. You could say, do we have violence now? Well, yes, we do. But if you think about it, in Noah's day, it was almost pervasive throughout the entire human race. It was all based on violence. There was no law enforcement or anything to protect people if you couldn't protect yourself. And there was a very easy way to become rich. You just find somebody who's weaker than you and you take from them what they have. And if they put up a fight, you teach them not to fight with you by beating them or killing them or whatever. And it was all invasive. In our nation right now, there are a lot of people who think violence is the answer to almost every question, but there's also a good number of people who don't think that. But that is diminishing. People who used to think that, they think, you know, they're not going to come protect me. I remember hearing a story from someone that said there was a bad person who was with them, and evidently that bad person had looked at the records in the family court, and they were talking to the good person, and the good person says, well, you're going to have to leave or I'm going to call the police. And the bad person said, well, how long did it take them to get here the last time you did that? 43 minutes. And there's a serious crime going on in 43 minutes. Now, that's Dallas. What about Baltimore or Chicago? Well, they're not going to come in some of those places because they'd be killed. What's happening now, those people who would be good people say, well, if they won't defend me, I have to defend myself. And so there's going to be violence growing more and more and more. And then, of course, the angelic infiltration of angels. Now, after the flood, that didn't happen again. But I believe at the end times, it is going to happen again. Satan lost all those angels who were doing it. We're going to talk about that in just a second. I'll show you that passage. But now, if it's the final battle, what has he got to lose? Create an army of half human, half angels. They think they can get somebody, with AI who would be a superior soldier. Oh, think about the soldier who's half angelic and the power that they would have. And so we need to understand that that is what's coming. And those two allusions speak to that Noahic covenant. And understand, some people say, well, Doug, he's not talking about destroying the earth by water again. No, of course he's not. He's going to destroy it by fire this time. But what I was talking about is the source of the power to author and perfect these judgments. Now, as I was reading something from Henry Morris, he had a very interesting idea. Now, I want you to think about this. If you are a developer and you come in with raw land, and you are going to create a development, what is the first phase of that plan? Demolition. Now, if you were to ever watch Chip and Joanna Gaines, what's the first thing they do to that house? Demo day, right? Now, I'm not admitting that I ever watch Chip and Joanne, But my wife loved that show. And anyway, Henry said, you know what? The earth is going to be destroyed by all these judgments. But maybe what that really is part of God's plan. That's the first phase for the millennial kingdom. It's called demolition. He's going to demolish the earth and get it in a condition where he can now remake it in the kind of earth he wants for the millennial kingdom. Interesting, isn't it? I think it's a great idea. That's where it's going. This is all part of God's plan. Demolition first, rebuilding second, and there he goes. And this is part of it. Now, he's going to use two compelling metaphors. One's of a drunken man reeling under the blows of God's continuing retribution. A drunken man. Some of us, maybe most of us, have seen someone who is highly inebriated. They have a hard time walking. And they many times have to reach for something to hold them up straight. And they don't think clearly. And that's what he's saying is going on with these people. And the second one is a shack that when the storm comes, it just gets blown down. And, where the pieces of it go, who knows? It's like the story that Jesus told on the Sermon on the Mount of building your house on rock or building it on the sand. And so here this terrible thing comes on, which brings us now to verse 21. So it will happen in that day that the Lord will punish the host of heaven and the kings of the earth and they will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeon and will be confined in prison, and after many days they will be punished. Then the moon will be abashed and the sun ashamed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Now, the first thing I want us to see and ask ourselves here, God's chastening hand does not land on the earth alone or its inhabitants. Who else does it land on? The host of heaven. Does that mean all the angels are going to be punished? No. Those who made the wrong decision, led by a guy by the name of Hillel ben Shachar, the day star. You know him better as Satan or the devil. That is going to happen. Now, you remember I told you that he had certain angels before the flood who infiltrated the human race and had cohabited with human females and produced people who were half angelic being, half human. And they were very powerful men and men of renown is what Moses describes them. But those angelic beings can't be killed physically. So what God did, he flooded the earth and he killed the Nephilim, that is the half angelic, half human. But the angels who did that, he put them in a prison, so to speak. Now, you look in this verse and it says, it's going to say hell. Well, it's not hell. And this is something I really get upset with these translators. They're not specific. There are 3 times when they describe hell. One is when people die, say in the Old Testament, and they go to a place called Sheol. In the Greek New Testament, it's called Hades, the place of the departed dead, and has several compartments. And they say that's hell. No, it's not. It's Hades or Sheol. Then there's a time that God is going to talk about the lake of fire. That is hell. That's the eternal place for sinners. Dawn, is there anybody there now in the lake of fire? Not yet. Who's going to get to be the first? Not Satan? Nope. Antichrist and his false prophet. They're going to get to spend 1,000 years there before Satan ever shows up or before any other sinners show up. But that's hell. Now, this place here is going to translate it hell, but it's really in the Greek Tartarus, which is a different place than hell. in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, it says this, "For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartaro in the Greek. Tartarus is the English way we say it. And committed them to pits of darkness reserved for judgment." In other places, I think in Jude, it talks about wrapping them in chains of darkness. Now, I don't know what chains of darkness are, but it evidently is something you can hold angels with. The kind of chains that we have, I don't think would hold angelic beings. But chains of darkness can. And so that is going to happen at the end. And what does it mean the sun and the moon will be ashamed or embarrassed? What it's talking about is the difference between the light of the sun and the light of Jesus Christ. His light and glory is going to be so pervasive that we don't even need it. When you get to the final place that we are going to reside for all of eternity, called the New Jerusalem, that city is going to be 1,500 miles deep, 1,500 miles wide, and 1,500 miles high. And right in the middle of it will be the throne room of Jesus Christ. And from the throne will come the river of life. And over this river, on roots on both sides, will be the tree of life. And it says there won't be any need for the sun anymore because of Jesus. And there won't be any night on the earth. Now, this city is descended from heaven, this New Jerusalem. And then you have the earth, which is mostly inhabited by the Jewish people. But you think about this, wait, light. How can you not have any night? If the light is coming from the New Jerusalem, when it hits the earth, the part of the earth that is facing New Jerusalem will be all lit up. What about the backside? Well, see, this kind of light is different than the kind of physical light we know. It will be all-encompassing. And there won't be any night anymore. And I wanted you to see that. So the glory of the Son of God is going to overshadow everything at the end of this 7-year period, Isaiah is saying. Now let's just have a few final thoughts before we finish. Although God will pour out his wrath on the entire world, those who trust in the Messiah right now, those who trust in the Messiah should be encouraged. Why? We, as God Almighty's children, will be delivered from that judgment. We will never have to face the judgment of God like that. Those who aren't God's children, and I want you to think about this. There's a lot of people tell you, well, you need to be worried. Because if you do something the wrong way, you could lose your salvation. Let me tell you, my father, Jack, was the one who conceived me in my mother, Kay, and I'm their son. Can he or my mother or I do anything to change the fact I am their son? None. Once you are born again, that's it. Now, isn't that wonderful? How would you like to live? Oh, gosh, had a bad day today. If he came back, would I lose my salvation today? What can I do to make... that's no way to live. That may be worse than living as a non-believer. But a lot of people do. And especially Calvinists. And so I want you to see we should be encouraged because we'll be delivered from that judgment. And we will, during the time of that judgment, we will be with our bridegroom. You will be physically talking to, touching, being around Jesus, the Son of God. Now, won't that be awesome? Won't that be awesome? A lot of us have heard that poem, which basically tells about someone who life was pictured as a set of footprints in the sand, and there were 2 footprints all the way along, and the Lord was explaining to that person, well, those are your footprints, the smaller ones, the bigger ones were mine. And then there comes a point where there's only one set of footprints, and it's just one set. And the person said, did you leave me during that period of time? And the Lord said to that person, no, I didn't. That was when I was carrying you. In the same way, we need to understand, because of that kind of thinking and that kind of understanding, what will we be doing I think it's almost like Jesus is going to get tired of hearing us say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What can I do to repay you for what you've done for me? No, it was a free gift, Doug. Yes, but thank you that you saved me, that you put this person in my life where I got a chance to hear the gospel. The second thing I want us to see is the judgment of evil is coming. It not only affects the people who are perpetrating the lawlessness and the injustice, but affects the land and nature as well. And these earth dwellers, during this 7-year period of time, they have defiled the earth with their wickedness. And the way God first cursed the earth as a result of Adam's sin, but the curse resulting in the affliction of the land is driven on by their now overwhelming weight of sin. Overwhelming weight of sin. We don't want to be in this period, and we need to be thankful. When was the last time you thanked God for saying or providing so you don't have to go through that tribulation period? You need to do that. And that becomes crown-worthy if you do it regularly out of your heart. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father, I thank you for helping me to get through this lesson today. I pray that you'll get me well soon. I thank you for preserving in this book of Isaiah this wonderful passage about describing the tribulation period and what it's going to be like at the end when you come back, and how your glory will be so brilliant and shining more than the sun. Help us to understand, Father, that you have a plan, that your plan is in effect. Everything is going to be happen at the exact and precise time that you planned it. And nothing is going to be a surprise to you. There won't be anything that happens that you haven't already prepared for and made provision for. And so, Father, help us to know that you are in control. And all we have to do is rest in you. And we just thank you, Father, for the chance. We thank you that you selected us to be your bride and came after us and wooed us and brought us towards your heart. Help us to never want to leave and to strive to be closest to your heart. I pray these things, Father, in the name of your Son, Jesus, in the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.